Since 2011, we've witnessed U.S. policy toward Burma undergo a discernible shift. During this time, this subcommittee has held a number of hearings to examine this policy change as well as concerns regarding the ongoing human rights abuses inside Burma. Last year, the administration decided to apply a more forward-leaning engagement strategy with Burma, but did so based on unfulfilled promises from the Burmese government. Most notably, this included the administration's decision to initiate direct military engagement with the Burmese military and a fiscal year 2015 request for international military and education training assistance. I think we all agree that Burma we see today is much different than the one we knew only a few years ago. Most will argue that Burma's sudden and unexpected democratic changes, which opened its frontier to the world, was indeed incredible. Nobel Peace Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi, her election to Parliament brought much hope, as did the regime's actions to release nearly 30,000 prisoners, of which 1,071 were political prisoners. However, the political and social situation in Burma has taken a sharp turn for the worse, and I'm very troubled by its current trajectory. The civil unrest between the Buddhist majority and Muslim minority is threatening the progression of Burma's future political reforms. Nearly 140,000 Rohingya have been displaced by violent attacks and live in concentration camp-like conditions. Last year, the United States Special Rapporteur called the situation a profound crisis, and since that time, the Burmese government has still taken few, if any, steps to forge a peaceful and harmonious or prosperous future for the Rakhine State. Even the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum Center for the Prevention of Genocide is now tracking Burma. With al-Qaeda's leader, recent call for Zawahiri's call for operations to expand into Burma, we have to fear for the future stability of the country and its government's unwillingness to do anything about it. The Obama administration has been very generous toward the Thein Sein government. The list of gestures is long and includes trade and investment negotiations and allowing Burma's military to observe the largest military exercise in the world, Cobra Gold. However, wanting to provide assistance to Burma's military, despite concerns that the military is still a perpetrator of human rights abuses against the Rohingya and other ethnic minorities, has not severed its ties with North Korea and is not committed to reforms that will ensure civilian oversight of its armed forces. It's hasty and careless. The Burmese military still uses rape as a weapon of war and has more recently shown its refusal to allow for further democratic reforms to Burma's constitution. In addition, there has been a serious clampdown on press freedoms. The July sentencing of 5 journalists to 10 years in prison and hard labor for reporting about an alleged government chemical weapons factory is outrageous. A country that sentences its citizens to hard labor for reporting about a very worrisome weapons program likely run by the military is no burgeoning democratic state. It's an authoritarian regime under the guise of reform pretenses. U.S. State Department officials have given no assurances that security assistance will ultimately help the Burmese people rather than just give legitimacy to one of the most oppressive military organizations in the world. They have failed to provide an outline and strategy for how future engagement will progress and have stated that civil society groups support this assistance when they do not. That is why I introduced H.R. 4377, the Burma Human Rights Act of 2014, along with my colleague, Congressman Joe Crowley, who's also with us here this afternoon. This legislation will ensure that U.S. security assistance is not provided to the Burmese military until Congress receives assurance that both the Burmese government and military have taken appropriate actions to end human rights abuses, are actively supporting democratic reforms, are appropriately addressing the resettlement and humanitarian situation of displaced persons, and are taking steps to allow for civilian control. H.R. 4377 restricts security assistance to Burma, including international military and education training and foreign military financing assistance, assistance to military units or personnel for demining programs, the sales of defense articles or defense services, extensions of credits and guarantees of loans under the Arms Export Control Act, and any license for the export of defense articles or services to the armed forces, police intelligence, or other internal security forces in Burma. At the same time, H.R. 4377 notes Congress is supportive of Defense Institute of International Legal Studies training on civil military relations and human rights to Burmese authorities, as well as supportive of disaster assistance to Burma. The bill requires the Secretary of State to submit to Congress a report on the strategy for engagement with Burma's military. and to provide a description of Burma's reform efforts, an assessment of the Burmese military's human rights record, steps taken by the Burmese military to implement transparency and accountability measures, and an outline of all ongoing activities conducted between the U.S. and the Burmese military. As we witness a deterioration of the human rights and political situation in Burma, I believe the administration needs to reassess its strategy going forward. It is time to give the Burmese government the opportunity to show that it is genuine and committed to reform. H.R. 4377 puts necessary restrictions in place to limit the injudicious and premature decision to engage with Burma's military. It is a critical piece of legislation that will help ensure reform efforts in Burma continue in such a way that all the people of Burma are supported. By linking military engagement with continued reforms, it promotes freedom and democracy and pins responsibility on the Burmese military to show it is committed to reform efforts. As of today, this has been severely lacking, and I would urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.